Welcome to SI Now. It is Tuesday, November 8th, and I'm Maggie Gray. It's not supposed to be easy. Timberwolves teammates Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins seem to understand that. As the last two players to win the Rookie of the Year honors, Towns and Wiggins are not only getting used to a new head coach, Tom Thibodeau, but new expectations as well. Our own Chris Ballard recently caught up with the duo in Minnesota.
I don't know if you guys saw the SI preview issue came out, and we used these anonymous scouts. But they have breakdowns of the team and then a breakdown of each of you guys. So I'm going to read the one about Karl and have you respond to it and tell me if you think this is accurate, right? Towns will be a top 10 player at the end of this season. I'll take him over Anthony Davis right now. The total package offensively, he can score without being selfish. You can move him all around the court. Great touch for a big guy.
Towns fires it down.
Karl-Anthony Towns put together a real complete effort.
You know, anyone that watches basketball can see that, you know, he's very talented, getting better every practice, every game, every situation that has to do with basketball. He's learning, always wants to learn. You know, and experience is the best teacher, so every game he's just going to get better. He's ready to start now.
So here is the scout about Andrew. I question whether Wiggins will deliver on the hype. He needs to prove that he can be a guy who contributes within the structure rather than just an open court guy who gets by on his athleticism.
That's it? Oh, well. I mean, listen, I don't believe in that, because if there's one person I've ever played with as much talent as Andrew has, and that's not from me just saying that and being my teammate, but that's from the experience I've had with playing with a lot of NBA players. His ability to play within the team's offense and be able to be part of the scheme, but also finding his way to contribute is uncanny.
Oh, my goodness.
He is going to be some type of special talent.
Especially for a scorer like he is. Like, you know, there's scorers in the league who need to have the ball in their hand to do great things. He doesn't need to have the ball to get 20. He could get 20 doing a lot of the little things that makes him such a great player.
I'm not afraid of a challenge. Obviously, there are a lot of things I like, otherwise I wouldn't have chosen this job. And so I'm excited about that challenge. I'm looking forward to it, and I can't wait to get started.
You know, often in a team situation, there's a head coach who's a strategist or maybe even an authoritarian, right? And then there's these assistant coaches who are development coaches. But there's Tibbs, and he's having you curl baseline, he's having you curl free throw, he's looking at your footwork. It's almost like you got every coach in one. Can you tell someone, like, try to describe to someone who hasn't been coached by Tibbs what that experience is like?
A coach like Tibbs, he gets you hyped for defense. You see a coach get excited for defense, that makes you excited. You know, then me and Kat get excited, the whole team gets excited. You know, so it's like setting the standard for the whole team.
You know, he does everything that you would think assistants would do for the head coach. He's the one doing it, from writing everything, little thing on the board. He has the assistant coaches, but he doesn't need them. He's doing every single thing himself. I think that's why his teams do so well, because he demands so much from his players that he actually does the same thing for himself as a coach. And it's fun. We talk after games, and it could be the same thing as, you know, he felt it was his fault. This play didn't work, or this play didn't work. And you never hear coaches say that, where they take the blame like that.
It's fascinating. It seems like a lot of his approach, it's detailed and it's work, but a lot of it's just desire, right? Like defensive desire?
I mean, it's just passion. You know, he has a passion for playing defense. You know, the greatest thing about defense, especially in this league, when you're playing great defense, it always leads to great offense.
Towns, a huge block denied by Towns.
Pass stolen by Andrew Wiggins. Wiggins is off to the races.
Wow, Andrew Wiggins.
You know, I think we're always all gonna eat. You know, there's always gonna be enough food at the table for all of us. As long as everyone understands that we're all gonna play at a high level, because no one's gonna have any ego towards anyone.
Everyone knows their role.
How about that pass from Ricky Rubio?
And there is a high percentage shot for Mr. Levine.
Some people's roles might be bigger than others, but everyone's role is just as important.
I heard an interview with you, Karl, where you said, I don't want to miss any of the steps. I want this to be organic. You know, the process is what's important. Yeah. How do you stay focused on that now and not look ahead a year or 2 years?
Everything has to happen the way it's supposed to. You know, don't rush anything, because when you rush it, it doesn't come out right. You know, take your time, give it some love, give it some passion, and everything always comes out the right way.
Everyone has to be a good teammate. Come in the morning, work. Stay after practice, work. The leaders have to lead.
If you look at LeBron, you look at D-Wade, you look at Chris Bosh, there's the pieces that are around them help them with rebounding, shooting, you know, giving them the exact pieces they need to be that team. It's a team effort. This game was based off just pure talent and one person. You know, Michael Jordan would have had more championships than he has, but it comes around the team. He needed the Scotties, he needed the Tony Kukoc, you know, he needed those Steve Kerrs, you know. They all implemented into the success that was his career. We have to just continue to be organic. You know, we got to continue to get better every single day. We had a step that we took last year to get to the point we are at this year.
Well, I really appreciate it, guys. It was great. Yeah,
appreciate it.
Well, the Timberwolves are off to a 1-4 start and still looking for their footing. They face the Nets in Brooklyn tonight. Okay, turning to fantasy football, in the last of the big-time bye weeks, the bye-pocalypse, if you will, are behind us. But that doesn't mean you can stop using the waiver wire to get ahead. Here's lead fantasy writer Michael Ballard with who you should scoop up.
We've made it to Week 10, the beginning of the final third of the typical fantasy football regular season. The most significant waiver wire portion of the year is already behind us, but there are still moves to be made, starting with these 4 players. The Packers have played 3 games since losing Eddie Lacy for the season. In those games, they've rushed for a total of 327 yards, leaning heavily on wide receiver Ty Montgomery and quarterback Aaron Rodgers. At some point, they're going to need a real back in the backfield, and they might be getting one this week. James Starks remains on pace to return in Week 10 after undergoing surgery to repair a torn meniscus nearly 4 weeks ago. He practiced in a limited fashion last Thursday and Friday, which suggests he'll be able to hit the 4-week timetable set out after the surgery. He should immediately take over as the lead back for the Packers. Rashard Matthews entered the season as a deep sleeper pick, but started the year giving up snaps to Andre Johnson. Matthews slowly but surely earned back snap share, and his increasing presence in the offense was hastened by Johnson's retirement. Over the Titans' last 5 games, Matthews has 21 catches and 5 touchdowns, good for 12.8 standard league points per game. Even though half of that has come via the end zone, Matthews' larger role and Marcus Mariota's progression bode well for the rest of the season. Chris Ivory rushed for 107 yards and 18 carries last week, far and away the most productive game on the ground for a Jaguars running back this season. He was also robbed of a touchdown on a botched replay review that should have reversed the call of a fumble on the field and awarded the Jaguars, Ivory, and his fantasy owners with 6 points. The Jaguars have been desperate for something from the running game, and Ivory finally produced it last week against the stout Chiefs defense. They'd be foolish to decrease his role in favor of TJ Yeldon going forward. Finally, let's hit the quarterback stream. The options aren't great this week, but with Matthew Stafford, Andrew Luck, and Derek Carr all on bye, a large portion of the fantasy community will need some short-term help. Enter Trevor Siemian, who has an excellent matchup with the Saints. They've allowed the 10th most points per game to quarterbacks this season. Going up against Drew Brees in the Superdome will be one of the Broncos' defense's greatest tests to date. If Brees gets it going as he usually does, Siemian will have to throw a ton for his team to keep up. That'll do it for the waiver wire heading into Week 10. I'll be right back here with all of you on Friday to talk stardom or sit-em. Until then, happy hunting on the wire.
As the Cubs continue their well-deserved victory lap on the late-night talk show circuit, the rest of the league is figuring out which free agents they can add to their rosters to try and beat the Cubs. Our own baseball scribe, Ben Reiter, is here to discuss his annual Reiter 50, the top 50 free agents on the market. And Ben, Yoenis Cespedes tops the list as the most coveted free agent this offseason. He was a member of the Mets. He can opt out of his contract and has. Where's he likely to end up?
Well, it's not a very good class overall, Maggie. Yoenis is clearly number one. He'll have a lot of suitors this offseason. It's not going to be waiting around for the Mets to swoop in with a short offer this year. The Mets will be in it, the Giants, the Dodgers, the Nationals. I like a dark horse, the rebuilding Phillies. What better home for a man named Yo than Philadelphia? I think we
Go
might.
Adrian.
I think he might end up there. That would be a shocker, but he's going to go, and he's going to get a lot of money this offseason.
Okay, so we're thinking major market for him.
Yes.
Jose Bautista, another big name on this list. Where do you expect Bautista to end up?
Of course, before the season, Bautista was talking about $30 million a year, maybe 5 years, despite the fact that he's turning 36. His OPS dropped by 100 points. Probably not going to happen for him. I think that he might be this year's Cespedes, really, a guy who lasts up until near spring training, and I think that he might follow the same path, ending up with the Mets on a short-term but high-money deal to try to soothe some of those angry fans in New York who in consecutive lost seasons will have lost both Daniel Murphy and Yoenis Cespedes.
I mean, he's in his late 30s, though, so I'm not sure why guys are expecting to sign these long-term deals when they're not young in baseball terms.
Well, I mean, I think it was partially a negotiating tactic by Bautista, get his name out there. And had he had a year similar to his past several, he would have been much higher on this list. But he's number 11 on the list, in part because of his age, but in part because there is a clear declining trend in his performance. He can still hit some out, though, for sure.
The Cubs coming off their World Series win. You were there to witness all the action in person. We know Theo Epstein, well, he said he was going on a month-long bender, but we don't believe him at all. They always want to keep their foot on the gas. Who could the Cubs be adding to their World Championship roster?
Here's a surprise. Of the top 50 free agents, I don't have the Cubs as the best fit for any of them. That's partly because it's a weak class. It's partly because the Cubs are so stacked. They've got their entire young nucleus coming back, really, including their entire rotation pretty much except for Jason Hamill. This is not the type of market in which the Cubs will overspend or really spend at all. The one area in which I could see them upgrading is maybe they'll bring in a closer, whether it's bringing back Aroldis Chapman, looking at Kenley Jansen, or Mark Melancon. But I don't expect a very active offseason for the Cubs, and they have no reason to make it as such.
Okay, so you think there's a possibility that Chapman re-signs with the Cubs, or is it more likely that he will go elsewhere?
It's more likely he'll go elsewhere.
Where do you think?
New York is a possibility. He could go.
Which one?
The Yankees.
Okay.
He could go back to one of the two teams for which he played this offseason. I like, again, a bit of a dark horse in the Washington Nationals for Chapman. They've kind of long struggled to shut down the ends of games. They had Mark Melancon for a bit this year. This worked very well. I think that they probably like that experience and can go for the best closer on the market that does have several good closers.
Okay, just don't bring them in when you have a 5-2 lead in Game 6. That's all we're asking. Every year we see a team, maybe even two teams, really try to win the offseason. It works to varying degrees of success. Who do you expect to, pardon the cliche, swing for the fences this offseason?
Well, I don't expect any team to absolutely dominate this offseason because the class is so weak. I think that teams know that if you get a bunch of these guys, it probably won't work out that well. However, I expect a headline grabber to be the Boston Red Sox. First of all, they have a big hole to fill at DH with Big Papi. I think they'll turn to their longtime divisional rival, Edwin Encarnacion, as the new Papi in Boston. I also think that they could bring back Rich Hill, who's a Massachusetts native. He's played for the Red Sox twice before. In the average winter, he'd be maybe a middle-of-the-road starter. This winter, he is clear-cut number one option on the market. I think the Red Sox could bring back that veteran depth to add to their rotation. He does have the best curveball in the game, Maggie, so that's something.
It's actually absolutely fun to watch him in the playoffs this year with the LA Dodgers. Ben Reiter, thank you so much. Congrats on another Reiter 50, a prestigious list to be sure.
Absolutely. Thanks, Maggie.
Monday Night Football saw the Seahawks beat the Bills 31-25, but it was the sequence before the end of the first half that was a cause of embarrassment for the officials and has raised serious questions about one of the league's biggest stars. Super Bowl champion Chris Canty joins me now to discuss that play and the game. And Chris, last night we saw Richard Sherman, who is a self-described student of the game, someone vocal about player safety issues, jumping off sides in an attempt to block a 54-yard field goal by Buffalo kicker Dan Carpenter. Now, Sherman goes for the ball, but also charges towards Carpenter's knee. Was this a dirty play?
No, I don't think it was a dirty play. I think the mechanics of the whole play threw off Richard Sherman's timing in terms of laying out and blocking the kick, and subsequently he ran into Dan Carpenter's leg. It looked worse than I think it actually was in terms of the intent behind Richard Sherman's play and his actions. But certainly I don't think there was any malice involved. I think it was a situation where, as a player, you expect the referee to call the play dead because he got such a good jump. But the referee didn't. The play continued. And as a defender, you're taught to play to the end of the whistle. And so I think that's what Richard Sherman did. Certainly I think it's a play that should have warranted an unnecessary roughness call. But as such, it was only a 5-yard penalty, 4 offsides, and that's the play.
Yeah, and Dean Blandino, the VP of officiating, agrees with you. He said it should have been an unnecessary roughness call. Dan Carpenter should have been able to stay in the game, but yet this frantic sequence of events ends up happening where ultimately the Buffalo Bills do not end up getting the 3 points from the field goal. How do you think the league should address what happened on Monday night?
I don't think there's anything that they can do outside of assessing a fine of some sort to Richard Sherman. But outside of that, I don't think there's anything that you can do right now. I think this brings a spotlight to the issue of officiating and making sure that you get the calls right. I'm not sure if that means adding an additional official or expanding replay to include penalties or certain penalties. But, the onus is on the National Football League to make sure that they get these calls right.
Adam Schefter had an interesting tweet where he said if this rule stands, teams should rough kickers before the end of each half or game-winning field goal. Do you think we're going to see more players try to take advantage of a rule or perhaps a referee's swallowing the whistle?
No, I don't think guys are going to do that because ultimately we're out there competing, but we don't want to hurt anybody. I think everybody recognizes that this is our livelihoods, and they don't want to jeopardize anybody else's opportunity to be a professional at this level. So I don't think you'll see this as a strategy by teams or by players.
All right, we'll have to wait and see what happens this week. But it is no secret, Chris, that NFL ratings are down. The league has been criticized from all directions. This mistake by the referees happens in a high-profile and very entertaining game. How do you think these gaffes will impact the league moving forward?
Well, I think the league is going to have increased pressure on making sure that they get the officiating part of the game right. Roger Goodell talked about protecting the integrity of the National Football League, and this is directly correlated to that, making sure that the officials are in communication with Dean Blandino and his staff and the league office on a regular basis, and make sure that there's an emphasis on making sure the officials get the calls right. They owe it to the members of the club, they owe it to the players, the coaches, they owe it to the fans to make sure that the entertainment product on the field on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays is officiated correctly.
We know that the referees are graded week to week. Interesting to see what Walt Anderson and his crew are going to get in terms of a grade after Monday Night Football. Chris Canty is a Super Bowl champion. Chris, thanks so much for your perspective.
Thanks a lot, Maggie.
All right, that's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of SI Now. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern with more from the lead up to UFC 205. That'll be exciting. And we'll look at SI's latest NFL mock draft. Oh yes, it's mock draft season once again. You won't want to miss that. But until then, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.